Oh, welcome to the Stone Cottage. It's a very blustery day, so if you hear a lot of noise, that's the wind. Um, but this is the time of year where I'm not exaggerating when I say every day you go outside and something new is happening. And on the left is my leatherleaf viburnum. It's just barely beginning to bloom. And right here, kind of in the middle of the fence, that is a white lilac. And I'll get a little closer so you can see what these look like. You can kind of see the buds. I'll take myself physically closer. Okay, here are the buds. And you can see on the left, they're very pink looking right before they open, and they look very white once they do open. And the tree is just barely starting to come out. In the next few days, the whole thing will bloom, and then as you walk past anywhere in the front yard, you'll be able to smell this. It has an amazing fragrance, which is just lovely. And here are the daffodils blooming. And this is a southern blend from Colorblends, and it's a large variety that will bloom in succession, giving me several weeks worth of daffodils. And you can see the tulips beginning to bloom. This is another blend, and this one is a blend of daffodils that will naturalize and come back year after year. Most tulips have to be replanted each year, and I like the ones that come back, so that's why these are just a little bit different. And we'll get a little closer. And this bare thing that looks like a stick, that is a deciduous azalea, which has beautiful yellow, kind of yellowish orangish blooms on it. And this is the flower bed I completely replanted last year, and you can see right there in the center, that's the yarrow. You can hear the wind. There is a hydrangea, and there are bees floating all around. There's a hyacinth. There's a pink hyacinth blooming here. Some white daffodils. They're kind of flopping over for some reason. I don't know what happened there. Now, the next thing that's really fun to see, this is the flowering almond that was just barely beginning to bloom last week. You can see just these amazing stems covered with the softest flowers you could ever imagine. It's like petting fur on an animal or something. It's just so incredibly soft and beautiful. And this is a plant that the previous owner died, and they opened, this is a gate back here, and they opened the gate and put in a roll-off, and this plant had a roll-off on it, so how it kept from dying is a mystery. And the first thing I had was a little plant that made 2 flowers, I think, and every year it's just gotten to be more and more, and this year is without a doubt the most spectacular. And he died in 2015. So that's been 9 years it took to get back to this incredible, beautiful state. But flowering almond, not something I see very often, and a viewer helped me to identify that last year. But I really enjoyed that. And back behind it is a climbing rose that will bloom later on. And here is the flowering quince. And down below, the purple squill and the daffodils. The daffodils are, these particular daffodils are in the front. They're starting to dry up. But the ones in the back are a little bit, they're a little different variety, but they were just a little bit behind. And over here, more of that Colorblends Southern mix. And I have no idea what each of these flowers, what variety each one is, but it is their mix. Huge daffodil with a big yellow cup. Hold that so you can see how big that is. And then we have, white ones with a yellow cup, yellow ones with an orange cup. Here's one that's white with a frilly pale yellow center. And another different one that looks like an egg with the white on the outside and the deep yellow inside. And these are the ones like we had in the back. There was this cluster of small ones. These are all kind of blooming together, and this blend is supposed to give me several weeks of daffodils, which I'm excited about. And then we'll have tulips, which will come later on. These are the more naturalized tulips, and this is another blend, and you can see the difference in the leaves. Here's one that has large leaves and it's already setting a bud, and here are some smaller leaves. Looks like 3 different varieties here. And maybe there's more, but quite a bit. And then coming up in there also are going to be purple allium. I just see a little bit of those coming up. And then right here, this cluster of green is, sometimes I've heard them called Spanish bluebells, and I've heard them called English bluebells, but these make a beautiful later in the spring collection of flowers. Now here's another peony coming up. This is a white peony, and I'll try to keep him I'm going to make sure he gets a little more sun this year, because he did not bloom at all last year, but I'm hopeful that we'll have a little more action this year. I am seeing more ivy. Continues, the battle with the ivy continues. And here, this is the lilac, and showed you this last week, but we're getting closer to it flowering. It definitely has good buds. I'm going to take you back around, and if you're keeping an eye on the lupin, definitely getting bigger and everything growing and healthy. This looks like more of the Spanish bluebells, and that little cute little leaf down there, that's some columbine, some aqualegia. And we still have the Paris blooming. This one has a whole lot of tulips in it. That same southern blend. And this should go on for quite some time, but boy, do I ever have the tulips in this one. I planted this bed pretty heavily. And here's that hibiscus. One is blooming here, and the other two are just some buds. Now this is the white lilac, and he's a lot closer to blooming. Oh, there's our first little white lilac. That's the first flower to open. I don't see any others on there, but there it is. So in the next few days, we will have lilacs blooming. This is our azalea. I showed you this last week. It's setting its buds. They're getting nice and plump. And in the next couple of weeks, we should have this azalea flowering out for us. That will come before this guy here. And you can see these are a lot smaller bud. And the size of the flower on an azalea can vary tremendously. There are a lot of different varieties. And this one has a smaller flower than the one over against the fence. Here are more of the little, I think this is the Scylla. If it's not, I'll do a little research and I'll put it on there on the screen if it's something different. I'm not sure what that was. That was spent. That was covered with flowers, and they're all obviously dried up. But some of these really unusual spring things, I'm not positive about the names. Back against the house, that is more of the Spanish bluebells. There is the scarlet honeysuckle. It's growing nicely, and here's this little buddy on the other side sending out some shoots. That is growing quite well and growing in the correct direction. I sense there's something to crawl on over there. I've got a hydrangea in the middle there, and I'm not seeing any action on it. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's going to survive or not, but we can always try. Daffodils, and above it, just in 1 week, you can see the incredible progress that's been made leafing out on this oak leaf hydrangea. And it definitely blooms before the other hydrangeas, but really interesting plant. I like oak leaf hydrangeas. Wish I had more than just the one. Butterfly bush got bumped, and you can see the spirea, even more brilliant than a week ago. It was just barely coming out then, and now it's going to town, as is the forsythia. And the pink is the flowering quince. And this is the tail end of the Edgeworthia. Come in here, and you know, once they're spent, the yellow flowers in the center there are still good. The ones around the edge are browning, and this is a very early blooming plant. But you can see that's pretty much at its end. And so probably next week there won't be much to look at here with the Edgeworthia, but still there. And I actually brought out my cushions. Haven't tidied things up here yet, but at least the cushions are out so I can sit and enjoy what's blooming here, and we'll get that all fixed up later on. And here's the squill. And then what's coming out here, well, daffodils that are not putting on any flowers, but underneath it, those leaves that are coming out, that is the toad lily that I just love. A little bit earlier, I saw Mrs. Cardinal taking a bird bath. And this is the snowflake. And this one's a little bit behind the ones in the back, but they are beginning to flower out. Oh, there's one that's actually open right there. Cute little nodding bell with little green dots on the edge of each little scallop. So that will be covered with flowers before too much longer. And we've got our vinca and our little yellow wildflower. And the tulips are coming up back here. And usually they do bloom. These are ones that were here when I bought the house, but they have a pretty pink color. But here's this. You may not be able to tell what that is right now, but that is the bleeding heart, the dicentra. And these go to town. I've got a lot of them all in here, and they're just barely beginning to pop out. And you can see I still have some ivy to go back in here. And this is an azalea, and it's putting on little leaves right there. There is one with a bud. It's a little bud right there. And here is an actual bleeding heart where you can, it's kind of upside down there, but you can see he's actually got the heart shape. So there's another dicentra. Those will be all around. And what this leaf is the Virginia bluebells. I don't see any flowers on him, or I do see some ivy here that needs to be taken care of. Oh, I do see a little bluebell there. Just a little bit of one starting to flower out there. And this is all back in here popping up. These are little spring ephemerals. The bleeding heart and the bluebells will flower, and then after the flowers are spent, by June these are gone. You don't even see them anymore. They completely die back, but that's the ephemeral nature of them. But I have been working back here pulling out ivy. It's just within the trees. I have to sit down and put on long sleeves and battle the ivy in there. But boy, it's a lot of work to get all this ivy out. Now, here's what I've been doing. You see, I've got a bag there that's completely full of ivy. My neighbor and I are both working on removing the ivy from this fence, and we're making tremendous progress, but it takes a little while. There's so much of it. Now, right here, this is that lilac This is a pale purple lilac. I think these are called like bloomerang or something, where they bloom in the spring and then they'll bloom again in the late summer. We'll get a second flush of blooms, and quite a few of them. It's kind of hard to see, but all of those branches coming out of that base are covered with the little flowers. And here we are in the back. Now, I have a redbud tree. That's my redbud tree. And he does have blooms on him. It's hard to see because I cannot get that close to him. But this is a very notorious redbud tree. I think he is the latest blooming redbud in all of Arlington. So he's starting to be covered with his little buds, and maybe next week we'll be able to see some color off of him. The hydrangea putting on more and more leaves, looking very good and healthy. And there's our flowering quince, and here's his friend in a darker pink, and you can see the buds are just about ready to open. If it doesn't get terribly cold, maybe they'll open tomorrow. And another cluster of the Spanish bluebells, which will bloom later. Ooh, and I see a tulip back there with a bud on it. And the sedum autumn joy, the perennial, coming back up. Oh, and there's that foxglove, really starting to put on a lot of vertical growth, which makes me very happy because they'll make beautiful flowers to sit and enjoy. We've had so windy, I put out the cushions and the wind blew them over just as fast as I could put them down. So here's the question. Should I leave them in the gold, or should I take off the gold and go with the blue? So we have options here for how we want to do that. Now, I like to sit back here and listen to my neighbor children. No, it's so nice to be able to sit here and watch things that are in bloom. So I try to always have something interesting, a series of things interesting to see from this area. But one of the interesting things to see from this area is my Camelia. And I'll take you a little bit closer so you can see that. Something that I find exciting, you'll probably look at it and go, you've got to be kidding me. This is my brunnera, and I bought it last year at the gardening center. It was on the, these things may die rack. This is a brunnera, and he is putting out, I think this is like perennial forget-me-not, might be another common name for it, but it's supposed to spread by runners, and it likes dry shade, so I figured this is perfect. It's one of those plants that if you plant it around the roots of a tree, it will get established, and then it, places where you can't dig because there's so many roots, it does well. So considering all of the roots here, I don't know if you can see all those roots, I figured this was the perfect place. Let's check out this root. So, that's my hackberry tree, and it has these incredible roots that go across the ground. But we'll see if my brunnera will get established there. Now, these daffodils absolutely never bloom, so these are a good candidate for just digging them out All those other places that have nothing in it, those were covered. This was just covered with daffodils that did not produce. So we'll get some more out here and see if we can't find some good ground covers to go in here. Now, the next thing that's come out this week, this is the Epimedium. This is the one I cut it back. This was the experiment. And I think cutting it back was not a good idea. Ooh, but there is a little Virginia bluebell too. But I've got some flowers on it, but not as much as I would hope. And this area all along there was covered with plants, so I don't know what happened there. We'll see. I may have made a mistake, but that's life, you know. And there's our hellebore, and here is my clematis, and it's setting some floral buds, a lot of growth occurring here, but there actually are some floral buds. I can see one right there. But this one blooms on old canes, and I made the mistake of cutting it back last year and I got no blooms at all. So now I know for a fact it blooms on old wood. And coming out this week, our muscari, our grape hyacinth, which kind of grows wild around here. I've been kind of transplanting it out of the middle of the walkway here back into the beds, but it takes a little while for it to get established once I transplant it. And here is the hostas coming up, and all through this area the hostas are really taking off. Now, I showed you this area last week. There's so many things blooming in here. Wow, the violets have really gone to town this week. So here's vinca at the bottom and violets at the top, and those are the Virginia bluebells, and I'm not sure what that is. I'll do a little research and I'll tell you what that is. But 6 petals and parallel venation. We'll see what that is, and I'll put that on there. Now, I have a big hosta in that blank spot right there, but he's not putting on anything. But these pale yellow tulips are going to town, as is that pretty red one. And these are tulips that have been here for years, and I have no idea what the varieties are. But this is always fun to see. Hostas, hostas, more hostas. All around here, more hostas. So they are just really taking off around here. And so in the summer, that's a really pretty thing to see. And this is the bed right by the storage shed, little garden shed. And again, I see hostas coming up, and more hostas coming up, and some tulip, and some vinca, and some sedum autumn joy, and there is that autumn fern, which is really pretty. And I need to get some. My favorite thing to plant in this window box is coleus, because it gets so little sun that I can't have any flowers. So the color from the coleus is my best bet. Part of the reason I wanted to do this video today as we walk over, because tomorrow it's supposed to get down to 30 degrees, and it will not kill the camellia, but what it will do is it will brown any of the flowers that are already open. So they are just spectacular and covered. And any of them that are not opened yet, so like these guys here, the edges will brown and then it'll open up and you won't see the brown, but kind of like you can see some brown there, but there'll be a load of brown, and then inside the beautiful Camelia. And I wanted you to see how perfectly beautiful this is. But you can see why I like to look at it from the inside, because I'm looking straight up at the sky. And it's just difficult to see it without getting a crick in your neck. But just a beautiful bush, and beneath that is our azalea. It's blooming from last week. Now, here is the Epimedium that I did not cut back. And you can see his little flowers. I think one of the common names, whoops, you just lost his petals. One of the common names for this is bishop's mitre or something with a bishop. But I think I got more flowers by not cutting it back. Whoa, and there's a bee going to town. He likes those little flowers. And this is more Epimedium up here. And again, flowering like crazy. Now, this is an area that I'm definitely going to be working on this year. Putting in some pathways, just little steps. I don't know if you can see that or not, but underneath there, some little brick steps. And so we'll put brick steps kind of meandering back through here, and more ground covers and shade-loving ground covers. The ferns love it back here, and the hellebores are happy, and there is more of the snowflakes. So these are definitely farther along. This is actually the south side of my house, but so you would think I'd get a lot more sun, but I've got my neighbor's house right there, so it's very shaded. And these are crepe myrtle trees, and you know, the logical thing would be to plant something right here, but the problem is nothing grows. Well, it does grow, but it grows way tall and way thin, and you don't see anything till you get up above the house, the neighbor's house, which is quite a bit taller than our house. So there's just no point in planting anything here because it doesn't get enough sun to grow down where you can see it. And you can see how we had this was a cedar, I think, and we just cut it down because you couldn't see it. It was just this horrible mess. And this retaining structure is made out of metal, and it's very primitive, and that's what my husband wants to replace, but I know how, you know, he's the speed of a snail, so not sure he'll get to that in this lifetime. But anyway, so here are some bricks for creating our pathway and our beautiful hellebores, and this will be where we are working and putting our efforts in this year. And this is forgotten the name of this, but it makes beautiful yellow flowers, and my husband wants to transplant this because it really does get smushed off between the air conditioner and the plant. Anyway, back to the front yard where things are looking beautiful. Thanks so much for joining me on a little walk through the garden. And and we'll see you next time.